Well, hi everyone. I'm John Retlin with a retro review of Bret Hart's failed WCW run. Quick disclaimer, I am a huge Bret Hart fan. He is my favorite wrestler of all time, and looking at what WCW could have done with him and what they didn't do with him, they completely botched his debut in WCW from the very beginning, and I will never understand it. They had a goddamn golden opportunity to beat Vince McMahon's ass into the ground, to pummel him further, because they were beating them handily in the ratings, even when WWE was getting a better TV product going, and they were, building an army, a roster, and all that, and they were getting back to doing some good stuff. They couldn't keep it hot, and I won't understand how they failed to capitalize on all the momentum that Bret Hart had, and they completely squandered it. And there's a lot of factors in it. I mean, you could read Eric Bischoff's book. You could read Bret's book. You could read The Death of WCW. You could talk to people that were in WCW at the time and, their thoughts on it. There's really only, a few sides. There's Bret's side, there's WCW's side, and then there's the truth. It always lies somewhere in the middle. And I'm a wrestling fan, so I'm just going based on my own experiences, what I saw on TV and what I've read, and just compiling stuff and trying to sift back through fiction and just separate it and everything and come up with the best way of what they could have done with Bret, once they got him. Because there was a lot of potential to capitalize on all the the white hot, nature of his exit from WWE to WCW. And it's just a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm not going to go over everything minute detail as far as his TV matches, but I will hit the pay-per-view matches and just show how much potential they squandered in a short amount of time. And there's a lot of things to factor in, so this is probably going to be a two-parter. And thank you guys for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. So with that intro and with a little bit of the groundwork laid, let's start off with the, what led up to his exit from WWE into WCW. You got the Montreal Screwjob. I have talked about the Montreal Screwjob at length, so have other wrestling fans, so have other wrestlers that were involved in it, and other wrestlers that were on the WCW side. So many people have talked about it that there's no point in me doing anything other than basically just saying, there's Bret's side, there's Vince's side, there's the truth. Shawn was a prick at that time. Triple H had done some stuff. They did a Montreal Screwjob Dark Side of the Ring episode, and Cornette took some blame for a lot of that, for, saying basically double-cross him. There's a lot of stuff to, unpack on that. And that could be a whole nother video, but I've covered that in other videos. I had a 20-year reflection, a retrospective on the Montreal Screwjob back in 2017. I'm not going to do a 25-year one in 2022 because it's been done to death. But there's a lot of stuff with it. Some people think it's a work. I don't. I don't think it's a work. I think it was just two sides that just couldn't come together. And I love Bret. I will take Bret's side on this. I can understand why some people feel that Bret should have lost the championship. And in retrospect, he should have, because he was going to WCW. Vince McMahon was not going to honor his contract. And Bret was going to go for more money and less dates. And Bret at that time was 40 years old. I'm not being ageist here, but he had been in wrestling. Well, he got into Stampede Wrestling as a referee, I think, in 76, and then made his debut in 78. So he was about 20 years into his career by this point. Maybe he wanted to earn more money. He had earned quite a bit of money with WWE, but WCW was just they were throwing Turner's money around like crazy. The amount of contracts that were in the millions of dollars, like, at least, 1 million, if not like 2 million in some cases, they were throwing around money and they're just wasting it. And they really were wasting it. Even though WCW was white hot at this point, even with some of the mistakes they were making, they were able to just turn a bunch of stuff into gold. WWE was doing the same thing. They were building up a whole bunch of stuff. So all these factors go into Bret basically signing a WCW contract for $2.5 million, I think $2.5 to $2.65 million or something like that. I don't know all the figures, but $2.5 million sounds about right. And it was over 3 years. So basically, he was 40 years old, and he was going to, live out his contract to the age of 43. So he was getting, I think it was like sometime in October, I think late October, that he ended up doing the contract. And he was released from his contract in October of 2000. Don't worry, I'm going to get to that stuff. But he did, all the stuff happened where Shawn, Earl, and everybody screwed Bret. Vince screwed Bret is really what it came down to. And Bret left. He did the WCW thing and left. So you got that happening. Now, that pay-per-view was on a Sunday. WWE was in shambles at that point. Some people refused to go to work. Undertaker was upset. All these stories you're hearing, Vince McMahon had a divided locker room. And Bret was done in WWE. That was it. There are stories that maybe there was an agreement where he would keep the championship and then drop it to, like, I think Shamrock or somebody at the December pay-per-view, but it's hard to know if that was actually true or not, or just a story that was floated out there while he was under contract to WCW. I don't know how that would have exactly worked. So he's under contract and he paid $2.5 million. WCW was beating Vince McMahon's ass and was in the midst of an 83 straight weeks of winning the ratings. Sometimes by a handy, massive margin. They were beating them handily, though. They were always beating them from, I want to say, about a month before Bash at the Beach 96, when Hogan turned heel, till April 13th, 1998. So WCW has this history and just this long track record of beating WWE. No matter what WWE did, even though their house shows are doing better and other stuff is doing better, you got all of what's going on WWE side, and WCW has this nuclear white hot, wrestler that they signed for so much goddamn money, an insane amount of money. So you would think that WCW would want to capitalize on this shit and put him on the next Nitro. Now, he had a 60-day no-compete clause. He could not wrestle. Okay, cool. Apparently, Bret has said that when he punched Vince, out after, like, when he was in the locker room right after the screw job happened, that he broke his knuckle. So he also couldn't wrestle. All right, he had to recover from that. Fine, cool. Broken knuckle, no-compete clause, or both factors. 60-day no-compete clause. So that means that he could not compete until January of 98. All right. Here's how you fucking do it, and here's where WCW fucking screwed up, and I absolutely goddamn cannot believe that they did this. Actually, I could with how they screwed up Sting and Hogan. You got Bret Hart. Screw job. He was screwed over and everything. It was all this, and even though it was exposing the business, so to speak, it was Bret with everybody on his side. Every bit of momentum was on his side, and all WCW had to do was put him on Nitro, put him on the next Nitro. The very next night after Survivor Series 97, when the whole wrestling world was talking, and many fans in Canada were upset, WWE fans were upset in the U.S., but especially in Canada, you could have gotten a huge influx of Canadian fans who maybe watched both shows already, watching Nitro to see what Bret Hart would have to say. Give Bret a live mic, give him 8 minutes, because Nitro at that point was 3 goddamn hours. Give him that. Let him cut down Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Vince McMahon, talk about how he took one for the team, and he punched out Vince, knowing that there would be no repercussions because he was gone. He even broke his hand. That's what he did to protect his image and what he did to Vince for whatever happened. Just have him say whatever goddamn thing Bret Hart wanted to say, and you know what it would have done? It would have gotten everybody to say, okay, we're going to keep watching Nitro because they've got the hottest damn wrestler in the world. And Bret Hart was the hot, at least on U.S. soil and Canadian soil, on Canadian soil. I'm not gonna talk about Japan, even though I'm sure Japanese fans did watch WCW and WWE as well, because New Japan was pretty hot at that point. So it was all Japan. There, on the U.S. and Canadian soil, you had the Monday Night Wars going on, and ECW is also doing some stuff. But taking them out of the equation here as far as how Bret was being perceived, he was perceived as the guy. He was perceived as somebody that got screwed over, that got, that Vince McMahon is this evil, tyrannical jackass, and all they had to do was just let him cut that promo. And boom, stake through the fucking heart, and that's it. WWE was likely done. It would have been 9 to 10 million people watching Nitro. You might have gotten a few million people watching WWE, but they probably would have taped it. And, and because this was before DVRs and stuff like that, at least, well, it was before a lot of, ways to really track these Nielsen ratings properly, unless, basically a lot of people were watching wrestling at that point, and WCW could have taken a lion's share of the audience. They could have done close to football figures. And they didn't do that. They did the exact opposite of that. They let Bret be off of TV for 5 motherfucking weeks. 5 weeks. They sat on that. Now, yes, you heard the stories about how WCW Thunder was being created and how Bret was going to be the guy to be on that show and be the main thing of that show. Okay, he was going to be the main star of Thunder. Fine. Thunder was a bad idea anyway. I don't know why Ted Turner ever thought it was a good idea, mainly because, TBS was a big network, but the whole point is original network and then TNT and all that, and wrestling had basically built his empire. Wrestling and the Braves, and I think Andy Griffith, is what was said. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So Ted Turner wanted Thunder to succeed. So why wouldn't you take the Nitro audience and tell them, hey, we may be asking you guys to dedicate 2 more hours of your life to WCW, as unlike Saturday Night or Worldwide and Pro, because that's what they had. They had those shows. And I've actually got, I think it was just Worldwide. I think it was Worldwide. I don't remember all the syndicated shows, so I do apologize for that. But they had a chance to promote Thunder, so you could have killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Bret gets a chance to basically say that he punched out Vince McMahon and told Shawn Michaels, Triple H to screw themselves and all that, and just say a whole bunch of stuff. And he didn't have to go with a whole bunch of swearing, but just let him go out there and fucking vent. And they didn't fucking do that. And that's what drives me fucking insane. Looking back on it, everything was there. Every goddamn thing was there. Every advantage to WCW was right there. And what did Bischoff do? What did WCW do? Nothing. They did nothing with it. Oh, we're just going to let him cool off for 5 weeks. Now, maybe Bret needs some time away. I don't know. I'm not sure what Bret's mindset was, but I'm just saying, throw $100 grand at the guy and say, hey, we're going to pay you $100 grand. We're going to fly in a private jet. Please come down, air your grievances. Just do something. And WCW, boom, that's it. They would have been off to the races and at least would have, if they didn't win for the next year, they would have won till at least the summer of '98. Bret would have been able to carry them for a number of months because Bret would have been the guy. And then just in subsequent weeks, have him cut promos, have him, come out and do that and do variations. Say, hey, well, you know what? I punched out Vince McMahon, I did all this stuff, and now I'm part of Nitro. I'm gonna use this time on Nitro. I want you fans to, I will carry you fans on my back. We will go to Starrcade. Thunder will start. I want you guys to watch that. You watch what I do. I'm gonna tear through the WCW roster. I came from the big company up north, and I'm gonna tear through this roster. And, have these great matches and everything, because Bret was, at the time, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Bret Hart was doing incredible work in 1997. I would argue that was his best goddamn year. Because he was great as a heel. He did all the stuff, the match with Steve Austin at Mania 13. Just before that, you had the infamous one where he pushed Vince down and said, frustrated doesn't begin to goddamn describe it, this is bullshit. And then would go on the heel run, the Hart Foundation, all that, the anti-American promos, the pro-Canada crowd, Canadian Stampede 1997, all of these things and more. Bret was on goddamn fire. And this is what WCW did. Meanwhile, Vince does a whole Bret screwed Bret thing. He looks really goddamn bad with this, but WWE was able to use that as an advantage. And basically, okay, Vince McMahon is going to give himself an excuse, basically, to be this, tyrannical jackass on TV. Okay, you know what? Good idea. I do give Vince credit for that. But then Bret's over there, again, cools off for 5 goddamn weeks. Instead of being on Nitro and this guy, because Thunder wasn't even implemented until, what, the first or second week of 1998? So he was barely on TV, and then finally when he made his Nitro debut, December 15th, 1997, he is made to be a referee at Starrcade 97. Now, still in the no-compete clause thing? Okay, cool. But if you had him cut promos and hype all this shit, because you had Sting and Hogan, and you had all that, and don't worry, I'm going to talk about how they fucked that up in just a little bit. They had a chance to have Bret Hart promote every goddamn thing and focus it around him and then say, hey, it will be my, go with the promo on the 15th of 1997, or December 15th, 1997, and say, hey, it will be my honor to be the special guest referee and nothing is going to happen. No screwing is going to happen. Nobody's going to get screwed over. It's going to be an even playing field. It's going to be this. I will be the law. And then he was the referee, for Larry Zbyszko versus Eric Bischoff, Starrcade 97, when they thought it was a good idea to put Larry Zbyszko back in the ring. I mean, he was a part-timer basically from about 91, 92 anyway. He wasn't really wrestling all that much. And then he was a commentator, actually pretty good commentator, except for the whole New World Order line that he kept saying over and over and over ad nauseum. Odor, pun very much intended. But Bret Hart was a special guest referee there. And there had been all this stuff about, oh, Bret was going to join the NWO. He's coming to WCW, going to join the NWO. And then he screws over, and then he doesn't screw over Eric, but he helps Zbyszko get the victory. Okay, cool. All right, Zbyszko gets the victory. So then we go with the Sting Hogan fiasco. That was a goddamn atrocity. Because they had every chance to make Sting the guy. He was already the guy, but after a number of months, after him not wrestling since Fall Brawl 96. So he hadn't wrestled for about 15 goddamn months. He'd made appearances, the crowd went insane. Uncensored 97 and the following Nitro, March 17th, 1997. 17th or 16th. It's one of the two. Numbers, a little bit in my head. A little bit confused. A little bit jumbled. Sting kept getting massive pops. And they had all. It was right in their hands. And they dropped it. And it was terrible. And the explanation for Sting, for them not putting the title on Sting and not doing the right thing was fucking bullshit. It's such a goddamn cop-out. Sting may have not been in the best place mentally, but at that point, put the title on Sting and just call it good, because then they fucked it up by Super Brawl 98. But going back to Bret, you got Nick Patrick as a referee. He does what was supposed to be a fast count, but it was just a normal count. Bret says, oh, no, we're not doing that. This isn't going to happen again. Bret tosses Hogan back in the ring, restarts the match, Stinger Splash, Scorpion Deathlock, and Hogan taps out. So Bret saves the day, and you got the crowd popping. But you also got a feeling watching that show, some of the crowd is like, you know, that wasn't a good idea. So you could argue that was kind of like the beginning of, you know, the foundation cracking for WCW. But okay, even with all of that, could they still have done something with Bret? Oh, fuck yeah, they could have. So what they fucking do? They start building this feud with Bret and Ric Flair in the Sold Out 98. Who is the best wrestler in the world? And they had worked together in WWE in 92 over the WWF Championship. It was WWF at the time. And Bret had, you know, been put, Bret got put over on I think it was Saskatoon, a house show. And that worked out pretty well. Bret was champion for a number of months. Flair wasn't. He would wrestle here and there, and then he would leave after, right after the Rumble 93. Like, he would lose the Loser Leaves Town match to Curt Hennig. So, okay, revisit that history. Talk about the fact that they had faced off against each other a number of years ago. And the match was good, do not get me wrong. But looking at all the stuff I talked about, that's how they introduced Bret Hart. Match with Ric Flair. Okay, not off to a bad start, but 60-day no-compete clause and not being featured on TV at all, really all that much, until just before Starrcade pretty much killed off his momentum. And then you got, you know, he was not on Super Brawl 98 because he probably had something in his contract, or maybe he wasn't going to wrestle as much, but you have this thing where at least you should have had him ready for pay-per-views. He should have been on every pay-per-view and said, hey, you know, he's the guy. He's going to be our guy. We're going to groom him, and we're going to, yes, the WWF audience knows him, and we are going to integrate him to our product, and we are going to give him the world title. And maybe not fast-track him to it, but at least give him a championship and give him a reasonable run, give him a TV or a U.S. championship. And don't worry, he would get that stuff at some point, well, at least the U.S. But then, during this time, like around Super Brawl 98, after he'd beat Ric Flair, said, okay, I'm going to defend the honor of WCW and I'm going to fight the NWO. So, okay, what happens? He has his Nitro debut on March 2nd, 1998. He beat Bryan Adams. No, not that one. Former Crush, that is, who was a member of, you know, one of the 60 members of the NWO. Everybody was a goddamn member of the NWO at that point. And then he faced Curt Hennig in Uncensored 98. Now, that's revisiting old history because they had wrestled King of the Ring 93. They had wrestled, and that very infamous, you know, well, not infamous, but very famous and very much, you know, praised Intercontinental Championship match at SummerSlam 91, where Bret was made by Curt Hennig, and Curt Hennig has a severe back injury, but it was like, fuck it, you know, I'm going to put him over. I'm going to do all this stuff. And Curt Hennig, unfortunately, like, you know, would that back injury pretty much haunt him for the rest of his career. So you're looking at all this stuff and everything. You're looking at all this stuff going on. And finishing up on the rest of this video, and then I'm going to do part 2 and possibly part 3 because I went a lot longer on that whole thing about WCW being fucking idiots with how they didn't use Bret Hart properly. So, Spring Stampede 98. We go with Savage beating Sting for the WCW Championship. So right there, they killed Sting off and everything. And I love Savage, but they switched the championship because Savage was part of the NWO and then he wasn't. And then he joined, and then he was part of WCW, even though he's kind of still in the black and stuff like that, and he beat Sting. But then, the very next night, because this is how Hogan operates, Bret Hart helped beat Randy Savage to win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. But he didn't join the NWO, at least not yet. So a mere 2 months after saying that he would fight the NWO, that's what happens. He beats him. Or he helps beat up Savage. He helps basically screw over Savage and helps Hogan. Hogan, who did not want to put over Bret Hart at SummerSlam 93 and did all the bullshit and everything and all that stuff. And the thing with Mania 9, it was a whole bunch of crap. You have all this stuff going on. Bret was a white-hot babyface coming in. Could have done everything with him. They didn't. No compete clause or whatever aside. He's going to fight the NWO. He's going to defend WCW. 2 months later, he turns heel. So right there, it's not up to a great goddamn start, and we're only a few months into his in-ring career. So that's where I'm going to leave that off, and I'm going to do part 2 and possibly part 3. So guys, look forward to that, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.